Story 1. I literally looked at her delivering mail around the offices as she looked up at me and smiled. I then walked into a wall. Really hard. Edit. Wow. I'm surprised how interested people have been in my silly story. So thank you for any rewards and upvotes that have been given. To date, she is happily married to a lovely guy with 2 children. Although, for clarity, at the time she was one of those rare women who was drop-dead gorgeous but didn't flaunt it. Softly spoken, clever, and had a fantastic physique that she clearly worked hard to keep. She did ask if I was okay, and I flustered terribly with embarrassment, informing her that I was sure the wall had moved places. My now wife still laughs at my awkwardness over that story today. Story 2. I've never been much of a ladies' man to begin with. One time at work, there was this gorgeous woman I had never seen before getting water from the water cooler. I was kind of standing around awkwardly, waiting for my turn, and blurted out, "So, you like water?" Story 3. Laugh out loud. Story time. So, in my university days, my buddies and I went to a pub. A friend and I were at the bar ordering drinks. This incredibly cute girl standing across the room caught my eye. I pointed her out to my friend and said, "She is gorgeous." She was looking at us and smiled at me. The music was playing, so there was no way she could hear what I said. However, she was deaf and could lip read. And that's how I ended up dating a deaf girl. Story 4. I was at a party sitting in the corner of a room. A goddess entered from the right side and I watched her until she exited to the left, mesmerized. The next thing I knew, I heard a kind voice say, "Hi." I was so stunned that I let out a primal grunt, looked at everyone else in the room, and then stood and walked away. Story 5. European girl with a perfect body and beautiful hair. We had a lot of chemistry. She told me her number and told me to add her on Facebook. I was in complete awe and was mesmerized by what I was seeing. Next thing you know, I'm in the taxi leaving and realized I was too distracted by her looks to remember her name or number. I still haven't fully gotten over that now 5 years later. Story 6. I was reading a book at a bar when an attractive girl tapped me on the shoulder and asked me what I was reading. I giggled and mumbled something incoherently, then took a sip from my drink. She went back to her group of friends. Story 7. There was this girl who showed signs of being interested in me a couple of years ago, but I messed it up badly. I wanted to ask her out, but I hyped her up too much in my mind, so I couldn't. She had the most beautiful eyes I had and still have ever seen. Her hair flowed in perfect waves, her skin was perfect, and she smelled so good when she walked by. Her face was so gentle and angelic. I want to scream when I think about how pathetic and scared I was. Spring break came and I talked to my dad about it, and he helped me come up with ways to get to talking with her to break the ice because again she had even showed signs that she was interested in me. But then, a couple of days later, we got an email from the university telling us to come get our stuff because of this new scary respiratory virus that came from China. I never saw her again. Story 8. My story. When I was beginning college, I became friends with this tall girl. Turned out she was a model and asked me if I wanted to go with her to a runway show. Of course, I agreed, but I had a lot of homework and I was struggling a bit. So, I went with her but sat in a corner with my book and notebook to study while she got her makeup and hair done. I was focusing when this absolutely gorgeous angel in a bikini came to me and asked what I was doing. I became speechless and showed her the math material I was working on. Turned out she was an engineer and helped me for about 15 minutes. She was really good and I was completely dysfunctional for the time. After a while, they called her for some preparations, and I just watched her go while her scent lingered. Story 9. My girlfriend. I had such a huge crush on her and still do, that when I went to ask her out, I stumbled over all my words. She was smiling so much but silent for like 3 seconds, and that was way too much for me, so I desperately blurted out, "Please say yes." I've spoken in front of over 500 strangers on stage, done stand-up comedy, and much more, and she's the only person who has ever made me fail basic communication so badly. She must have found it cute, though, because we're still together 12 years later. Edit because a few people have mentioned it. We both care very little about marriage. We haven't always been great with communicating, but are fantastic with it now. We've spoken about marriage a few times now, and it always ends up with us feeling the same way. Eh, we'll probably get around to it one day. We got lucky and ended up agreeing on a lot of things in life. No kids, lots of animals, political values are the same, and we have similar views on how heavily we value marriage. Thank you for all the kind words too. It's the perfect relationship in my eyes, and she has taught me so much. Story 10. I, 21-year-old male, started an internship during COVID-19 and had been working very closely with this girl, 24-year-old female, for about 2 months. I never actually saw her face because of the masks, but I could tell she was very attractive. One day, I walked over to her cubicle to ask a question. I had caught her on her lunch break without a mask, but she insisted she could still help me out. Conversation went as follows. Me, whoa. Her, what? Me, oh, I've just never seen your face before. Her, looks at me confused. Me, realizing she might think I'm saying she's ugly. Not that there's anything wrong with your face. I've just never seen it before. Yeah. Her, yep. With an awkward grin. Me, I'm so sorry, your face looks nice. Walks back to desk. After sitting at my desk for the next 10 minutes contemplating my entire existence, I realized I had to go back and actually ask my question. Safe to say I took a loss. Story 11. I have always been careful about what I said around her, but could never talk without getting tongue-tied. Eventually, I asked her out and she accepted, which took some of the edge off because I knew she liked me too. Over time, we realized we weren't compatible and agreed to stay friends. She agreed to be my wingman when we go out to bars. In my opinion, it went better than I could have ever hoped. Story 12. I saw this girl 3 to 4 times a week at my gym for about a month. We spoke in passing maybe twice. I didn't know how to act around her. This is unusual for me because I'm pretty confident talking to girls. All I wanted to do was ask her out, but I didn't know how. Finally, after a couple of weeks of thinking about it, I mustered up the courage to do it. I finished my workout and waited about 5 minutes until she was done. As she was walking out, I caught up to her and introduced myself. Then I asked if she wanted my number. Unfortunately, she said she had a boyfriend. However, she was really nice about it and appreciated that I had asked. Overall, I'm happy I got the courage to ask. The mystery of not knowing was worse than the rejection. Story 13. I used to know this girl at university, the most beautiful girl I've ever seen. I could never be normal around her. Everything just came out ridiculous and awkward, like an Alan Partridge sketch. Once I said, "So, do you like beans?" as an opening conversational gambit, and I still have flashbacks at night. Story 14. She was a nurse aide at the place where I had laser eye surgery done. She was easily the most beautiful woman I have ever seen in my life. Her eyes were gorgeous. I remember having enough presence of mind to strike up a conversation with her, but along the way, my mind went blank and I was just speechless. Her name was Dawn. I never saw her again. I also had an incredibly attractive coworker who had a boyfriend. At some point, she told me they used to have an open relationship. I will be honest, I definitely hoped she would open things back up and include me, but that never happened. Story 15. She was leaving a ball with her husband. He was clearly drunk and trying to grab an unopened bottle of cognac off one of the tables. There was a bottle on each table as well as lots of champagne bottles, but you weren't allowed to take them out. She was wearing a pink silk gown and looked like Gal Gadot but taller and possibly part Asian. She was so graceful and elegant. She didn't get upset with her husband's antics or anything but gently coaxed him to leave it alone. She noticed me subtly laughing at the whole charade, smiled and said, "I don't think he's ready to leave. Maybe we should stay a little longer." Then her husband noticed that she was distracted, let it go, and told her he was ready to go home. She smiled, said goodbye, and I never saw her again. I swear I saw her look over her shoulder. But she was probably the most elegant, graceful, beautiful woman I've ever seen in real life. The way she carried herself, her walk, her lightness, her whole aura was intoxicating. Story 16. My friends and I briefly became friends with the one supermodel attending our university. We sat next to her in class one day and were literally thrilled after she left. We couldn't hold it in. We were grinning from ear to ear. She even remembered my name afterward and said, "Hi," when she passed me on campus. It's the most awkward I've ever been around a woman. Story 17. I'm not a man, but I've seen a pretty woman when I was in my teen years. She wasn't drop-dead gorgeous, but I don't know, I just couldn't stop staring at her. It wasn't because I liked girls or something. It's just that she had a charm, and her smile was so beautiful. She was friendly with everyone else. I truly admired her charisma and how she just seemed to fit in effortlessly. I don't know why, but she still lingers in my mind, and man, I wish I was that charming. Story 18. I was working as a resident in a hospital where students would rotate through our clinic at certain times. This gorgeous girl I had seen around the hospital rotated through a few times. We had never spoken but would just smile at one another here and there. She was tall, had dark skin, dark hair, high cheekbones, full lips. She was a goddess. Her face would replay in my mind. I feel like I'm pretty good at conversing and flirting with women, but for some reason, I could never get the courage to speak to her. Each resident in my clinic had their own treatment room. I had a little set of speakers that I would play some of my playlists on while I treated patients. One day after a patient, the girl walked by me, called me by my name and said, "I just want you to know every time I'm in this clinic, I try to get a treatment room near yours because I love the music you play." My brain scrambled for a cool response, but all I could muster was, "Oh, glad you like it." I went from flattered to battered in about 5 seconds. Story 19. I have the fortune or misfortune of working alongside one of these women. I know I'm not the only person who thinks this because she regularly gets double the amount of tips that everyone else does. She's a bit short and has blonde hair, but at the same time, there's a very clear indicator all the odds were stacked in her favor, as she's currently also getting her doctorate. Story 20. I have a friend of mine that is way more beautiful than she'll ever realize. I'm talking top model, Miss Universe looks and body, but she doesn't know it. Initially, I could barely talk around her. Now I'm all good. Story 21. I understand what you want to ask. It happened to me when I bumped into Monica Bellucci. She was 6 inches away from my face, right in front of me. Her smell, her perfect olive brown skin, her big black eyes that were stuck on me, and even that sphinx-like smile she gave when she realized I was totally smitten by her, still lingers in my senses even after 15 years. Story 22. I kind of have the opposite. I was a dysfunctional human being, and then I met a girl that made me go, if you want her, you're going to have to fix some things. I'm not 100% there yet, but working on it. Story 23. Not me, but there was one woman at my job who was outrageously hot. Like hotter than any woman should be allowed to be. It turns out that she was also a fitness competitor, but not one who was muscular all the time. Indeed, she was just super fit is all. We worked together on occasion, and I was very conscious of not acting like a fool around her. On the other hand, another coworker and I once walked by her. He'd never seen her before, and he just giggled and grunted as we walked past her. She was that hot. Story 24. I was working as a bartender and was pouring a glass for someone, and kept pouring until a patron hollered at me. To describe her would take away from her beauty. I am not able to put into words with my limited vocabulary how beautiful she truly is, inside and out. We are married now, and it is the classic opposites attract. She's smart. I am not. She has all the looks. I am bland at best. I never thought I would be so smitten with someone. I was sure love would never find me or wasn't for me, and she barged into my life and took it by surprise. Story 25. There's a kind of beauty so overwhelming that it doesn't mean anything beyond confusion. You can't describe or analyze it. It just is. I knew a girl like that once. Story 26. Only once as a teenager. The hottest girl in school put her arm around me and started saying she liked me, and I had some sort of brain stroke reaction. It was exactly like that scene early into the Baywatch movie when Casey Jean talks to Ronnie at the beach. I blew that unexpected opportunity in the most spectacular manner possible, short of embarrassing myself. Oh yeah, the question asked for a description. Tall, long legs, long dark hair, slim but well-proportioned body, and a face to die for. Like the Gwen Grayson character in the Sky High movie, with slightly bigger breasts. Or a taller Phoebe Cates from the Fast Times at Ridgemont High movie. Story 27. When I was in college, I fell in love with someone who didn't reciprocate the feeling. The sentiment lasted for 3 years, and during those 3 years, I dreamed of her face at least a couple of times per week. I was miserable and sad. But to answer your question, she was short, brunette, curly-haired, with big eyes and thick eyebrows, and she had a very cool energy to her. She radiated this sexual liveliness as if she was always ready to dance. She was a good friend, but could also be rude and inconsiderate at times. I don't know, I'm just reminiscing now. Story 28. Yes. Roughly 20 years ago, this woman was my senior at work. Her ancestry included German, Irish, Scottish, and Russian, and all of that mixed into this ridiculously pretty woman. She must have been 10 years older than me, so graceful and ridiculously charming. She spoke fluent French and spoke English with a posh London accent. I was utterly besotted. She brought out the best in me at work. I did some of my best work for her. A couple of years later, I switched roles in the same company in a new country. Turns out she moved a few months after me. I wonder what fate has in store for us. Could it be that I could marry the most beautiful woman on earth? A few months later, I get a new boss who I later discover is married to her. What a cliché. In love with the boss's wife.